Thanks for staying with us on SABC News. President Jacob Zuma has finally released the Fees Commission report, which recommends that South Africa increase spending on tertiary education, especially for poor students. The report says South Africa should hike spending on higher education to 1% of GDP. The report was first released to President Zuma in August, and he has been heavily criticized for not releasing its contents until now. The report says South Africa should increase spending on higher education to the same level as that of similar countries. Now, the National Treasury has confirmed the resignation of its Deputy Director General and Budget Head Michael Sachs. This comes amid allegations that the Presidency wants to provide free tertiary education at a time when the budget is already severely constrained. Sachs told Treasury he wants to serve the public sector in a different capacity. Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba says Treasury remains committed to a budget that focuses on fiscal consolidation and is mindful of the economic challenges the country is facing. There is allegedly a new plan to find 40 billion rand to fund free tertiary education for students whose families earned a combined salary of less than 350,000 rand a year. The Fees Commission report, which was released today, says there are serious constraints to providing free tertiary education. Sachs' resignation and the release of the report has led to a weakening of the rand. Sam Roland, an economist from Econometrics, joins me in studio now. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Does it mean anything that the rand weakened at the same time as these announcements and weakened by 1% earlier on today?
Sure. I mean, this announcement is huge. It's huge for the country and it's huge for the National Treasury. Michael Sachs, a 10-year veteran of the Treasury, widely regarded, widely respected, not just in South Africa, but also abroad for his managing of the budget and his acute understanding of what needs to go into preparing a budget for a country that faces the difficulties that we face, and being able to provide funding for all the various challenges we have. And I think the reaction of the market just shows you what sort of impact that was felt from this.
We see from the Commission that one of the recommendations is that spending on higher education should be 1% of GDP. Obviously this news has just come out, so people are going to run around and do their numbers. Can South Africa afford this?
So I think the question to ask in this situation is not can we afford it, but how can we afford it? And this is something the Treasury has been touting for a long time, and many in the economic sector have also said that it's not whether we can afford it, but what sort of trade-offs are we prepared to make to be able to fund this, and whether this involves cutting back on some of our other expenditure, say in matters such as defence or various other departments, or raising taxes, raising the income tax rate or raising the VAT rate. If we're able to do that, and if that's able to bring in additional funding, then certainly we should be able to afford it. The question is, though, we've seen when we raised the income tax rate, hoping it would bring in more tax revenue. At the latest MTBPS, we saw a decline in tax revenue. So this is very concerning in terms of raising income tax. It then begs the question, do we have to raise VAT or, in fact, cut spending or be more efficient in our handling of budgeting process? And this then ties into a number of other issues, such as the performance of state-owned enterprises or the performance of provincial government.
I'm glad you spoke about the need, obviously, to address the many social challenges that South Africa faces. I'm trying to understand, perhaps especially from a market perspective, why there were so many jitters when these persistent rumors are emerging about President Jacob Zuma saying he's rumored to say that he's going to push through free education and people must just find the 40 billion rand. So if there is that need, Treasury is aware and is trying to find out why are the markets reacting like this? Budget isn't something that gets thought up a month before the process in January or in August for the case of the MTBPS. This is something that takes months in advance. It's a lot of consultation. Different departments are consulted as to what their needs are, what their requests are, and it then gets balanced as to what we can afford, and if we can't, if our current tax revenue isn't going to be able to afford this, then are we going to need to borrow this, and are we going to be able to afford to borrow this? The markets then react jittery. Once the budget gets passed and delivered by the current finance minister, we see a situation where the market digests that the message that is being put forward by the finance minister, is it one of
current trouble like we saw at the latest one? Is it positive? What sort of message are we seeing? So then to suddenly announce a new sort of funding requirement just after the budget has been passed really sends the market into overdrive. If it was something that had been well thought out, then we'll probably see a situation where it gets put into the MTBPS and discussed properly, but that it gets announced not even after the ink has dried on the MTBPS certainly brings the market to jitters. The other thing, of course, is that the finance minister announced that there really wasn't a lot of money being available over the next couple of years, and that it really must be prioritized into the things that have the most impact. Not that education is not something that is a priority, but it is a certain amongst other priorities. Now, to suddenly announce that it's getting a greater priority than the other things like grants or infrastructure spending is a big problem.
Very briefly, the presidency now works with Treasury in terms of oversight of the budget. Is that unusual, and what's the sentiment around that?
Sure. So, I think there needs to be a close relationship between what the presidency is planning and what the Treasury is able to do. It also needs to tie in with current policy, current ruling party policy that says this is what they're planning. If you have three different directions of the Treasury aiming in one direction, the presidency in another, and the ruling party policy pushing in a different direction, this is when you start to have trouble.
Sam Roland, thanks so much for your time on SABC News. We now